God and Science by John W. Dawley. Copyrighted by the John W. Dawley Trust. Narrated by Michael Drew. Chapter 3. The Days of Creation as Root Notions of Reality. The purpose of the first record of creation. The Bible begins with the record of 7 specific days of creation. What is the significance of this record? Bible history is supposed to have begun in the year 4004 BC, but we now know that our material universe has existed for about 2,000 million years. Therefore, this record of creation in Genesis can have nothing to do with the original appearing of our material universe, as was formerly supposed. Before considering the real meaning and purpose of these days of creation, it may be as well to remind ourselves of the modern theory as to the composition of the Hexateuch. It is now known that much of these 6 books was originally myth, folklore, and traditional history, handed down by word of mouth, in some cases for several thousand years. It was not until the Great Prophetic Age, between 900 BC and 300 BC, that this material was gathered together and put into written form. Moreover, it is evident that the prophetic writers who adapted this material to form the book of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Joshua were much more interested in their spiritual purpose than in historical accuracy. These first 6 books were mainly composed of 4 documents. These are known as the Yahweh document, written about 850 BC, the Elohistic document, written about 750 BC, the Deuteronomic document, written about 650 BC, and the priestly document, begun in Babylon in about 550 BC. All these documents were compiled by inspired Hebrew writers in the prophetic age of Israel. They were probably not the work of single individuals, but of many writers, whose names are now for the most part unknown. As each new document was compiled, the earlier ones were in many cases incorporated, with the result that the 4 documents in our present Old Testament are so closely intertwined that it is sometimes difficult to distinguish them clearly. It is now known, however, that the first chapter and the first 3 verses of the second chapter of Genesis, containing the record of 7 days of creation, were introduced into the Scriptures through the priestly document, begun in about 550 BC, when the Israelites were in captivity in Babylon. Peake's commentary on the Bible says of this account of creation, "The priestly narrative of creation is ultimately derived from a frankly mythical story, still known to us in its Babylonian forms, but the striking feature is the all but complete obliteration of mythology." The discovery of the Hammurabi tablet in Susa, Persia, in 1902 proved that a somewhat similar record of creation had been written by King Hammurabi in Babylon in about 2150 BC. Among the ancients, there had also been many and varied stories attempting to account for the beginning of the world in a similar way. Is it to be supposed that the inspired Hebrew prophets were primarily interested in portraying in a symbolical way the beginning of the material universe? Is it not more probable that these great thinkers, to whom the spiritual was always the important factor, were more concerned with revealing an ordered spiritual process of divine thought and revelation, through which men could forever grasp and use the ideas of reality and of divinity? It seems logical to conclude that these spiritual seers wisely accepted as one of the well-known symbols of past ages this 7-fold record of creation to interpret the ordered development of essential thought, and furthermore that they lifted this commonly accepted symbol out of Chaldean religion and astrology into the light and order of monotheism. To return, then, to our original inquiry. Why is this record of the 7 days of creation introduced at the beginning of the Bible, especially as it only appeared in the latest document, the priestly document? Is there a deeper and more practical reason for its important position than has so far been given by theology? The author has for over 40 years studied earnestly the symbolism used in this record, pondering the spiritual tones of these days of creation, and he's convinced that they constitute a perfect, ordered development of spiritual thought, presenting the divine nature just as surely as the 7 notes constitute an ordered approach of musical thought to the subject of music. It must be clear to any thinker that the notes of music create music for the individual. They are the days of creation in music, as it were. When the spiritual tones of the days of creation in Genesis are understood, one can find them appearing and reappearing in different illustrations throughout the scriptural writings, from Genesis to the Apocalypse. Just as in music, the notes appear in endless combinations in musical compositions. The symbolism of the days of creation. Let us then consider in detail the symbolism used in the first chapter of Genesis to portray 7 stages of revelation, 7 periods of progressive spiritual thought. The text of Genesis 1 through Genesis 2:3 is introduced here in order that the reader may be able to refer to it with ease. First day, Genesis 1. 1. In the beginning God created the heaven and earth. 2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. 3. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. 4. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. 5. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Second day. 6. And God said, Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. 7. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. 8. And God called the firmament heaven. And in the evening and the morning were the second day. Third day. 9. And God said, Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. 10. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. 11. And God said, Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is within itself upon the earth. And it was so. 12. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. 13. And the evening and the morning were the third day. Fourth day. 14. And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night. And let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and years. 15. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth. And it was so. 16. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. 17. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth. 18. And to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. 19. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Fifth day. 20. And God said, Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and the fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. 21. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. 22. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. 23. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. 6th day, 24. And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. 25. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. 26. And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. 28. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. 29. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. 30. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. 31. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the 6th day. 7th day, Genesis 2. 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. 2. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. 3. And God blessed the 7th day, and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. It should be remembered that at the time this record of creation was written, there existed a general belief that the surface of the earth was flat. Above this flat surface there was supposed to be an arch or vault, which was termed a firmament. Above this firmament there were believed to be waters. Beneath the earth was a place called Sheol, where men slept after death, and beneath Sheol there were more waters. Consequently, there were waters above and waters beneath. It's essential to realize these things in order to understand intelligently the symbolism used in this record. It would certainly be the most natural thing for the prophets to symbolize the beginnings, or Genesis, of the vast story of reality by using as symbols things with which men were well acquainted, just as our small boy at first had his bricks for symbols of mathematical fact. Bearing this in mind, let us now enumerate the main symbols used each day of creation. In the first day there was light. On the second day a firmament was established. On the third day the dry land appeared. On the fourth day the sun, the moon, and the stars were brought into the picture. On the 5th day the waters brought forth abundantly the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air. On the sixth day, God created man in his own image and likeness, and on the seventh day God rested. From the point of view of the seeker for truth, could not the order of the 7 days of creation be briefly interpreted in the following way? First, the light of intelligent spiritual thought dawns on him. Then he begins to understand that light, and this understanding becomes a firmament in his thinking, whereby he can separate that which is fundamental and real from that which is not. He now finds that a very definite sense of reality is unfolding in his thought, so tangible and so changeless that he mentally and spiritually feels himself to be on dry land. Then he realizes that the ideas which are unfolding to him are the natural outcome of an eternal divine system of ideas governing and controlling all thought and experience. This is symbolized in Genesis by the system of celestial universe, the sun, the moon, and the stars. As the seeker begins to grasp the perfect system of divine ideas, he finds that his thought is uplifted, and, in proof of this, his happiness, his health, and his opportunities are all multiplied. This is a sense of the 5th day of creation, where the fowl of the air are used as symbols of exalted thought, and the fish of the sea as symbols of abundance. At this point, the individual begins to be conscious of himself as he really is, man in God's image and likeness, spiritual and perfect. Finally, this must bring him to a state of thought symbolized by the 7th day, a deep and abiding sense of peace, comfort, assurance, and rest, for he's now touched the hem of infinity. The days of creation from the divine aspect. Now let us also consider what this record means from the divine aspect. Could it not be interpreted somewhat as follows? The first day of spiritual creation, with its statement, "And God said, let there be light," symbolizes the operation of divine law for ever appearing to mankind as enlightened thought, where intelligent progress in any subject must always begin. The second day of creation, declaring, "And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters," symbolizes the divine order which, when understood, always separates the true from the false, the good from the evil, and unfolds the good and the true to spiritual sense. The third day of creation, with its demand, "Let the dry land appear," symbolizes the eternal rule of definiteness, and this maintains the changelessness and the permanence of the good and the true. The fourth day of creation, on which it is recorded that God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years," indicates to inspired thought the ideas of divine system. The fifth day of creation, declaring, "And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven," symbolizes the method whereby the infinite multiplication of spiritual ideas takes place. Thus exalted thought leads on the line of creation to higher altitudes of enlightenment. The sixth day of creation, as epitomized in the statement, "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness," symbolizes the climax of creation or revelation as the divine ideal, the form of the Son of God which presents true manhood. And finally, the 7th day of creation, of which it is stated that God ended his work which he had made, symbolizes that from everlasting to everlasting the infinite includes all ideas in its eternal plan and design. If this interpretation is correct, if the writer of Genesis was recording the ordered way of eternal spiritual revelation and not material creation, then there opens to mankind in its search for God a faint glimpse of an eternal spiritual order, whereby thought can expand and develop until it approximates a definite understanding of an infinite calculus of spiritual ideas, and ultimately attains to that consciousness of spiritual reality which is above symbolism. The days of creation as numerals of spiritual consciousness. In the foregoing analysis of the days of creation, the author has touched but lightly upon their spiritual meaning and order. Naturally, their scope and range must be infinite. To illustrate, when the small boy learns mathematics, he begins by learning the 10 digits in arithmetic, and to his delight he can soon rehearse them in ordered sequence. He very quickly finds, however, that these numbers are but part of a complete system, and that he must later learn how they combine in a fourfold calculus of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Numbers soon cease to be no more than a counting order to him, and become fraught with manifold possibilities. A similar experience awaits any spiritual thinker who begins to consider intelligently the 7 days of creation, or revelation, as recorded in the first chapter of Genesis. He soon finds that the first day, which originally symbolized to him the beginning of intelligent thought or spiritual enlightenment, now expands into a fuller and deeper sense of the same tone. As well as ideas of beginning, origin, and creation, the coming of light on this first day is seen to indicate divine action, the action of intelligence, wisdom, and law, and also bring with it right ideas of power, authority, and so on. The second day, which at first symbolized to him a sense of ordered development and the ability to separate the real from the unreal, now broadens into a spiritual sense of purity and of infinite good. He finds that in the pure understanding of reality there is strength and substance. So this second day brings to him ideas of development, true discernment, reality, purity, good, understanding, order, strength, substance, and so on. The third day, which at first gave him a sense of changelessness, permanence, and definiteness, now expands into a deeper tone of safety, sanctity, and of true identity with God. In this safety and sanctity there is constant joy, freedom, and perfect satisfaction. At this point the thinker begins to realize the definiteness and yet the diversity of each of these days of creation or periods of spiritual enlightenment. The fourth day, which at first indicated a sense of system capable of proof, demonstration, and interpretation, now brings a foundational sense of absolute science, and above all, it brings to him the fixed conviction of the Infinite One and its perfect government. The fifth day of exaltation and multiplication now becomes to inspired thought the symbol of infinite fatherhood, or life. It indicates immortality and eternity. The fifth day also reveals the nature of God as the one divine ego, and shows that uplifted thought is indivisible from the one infinite individuality, commonly called God. The sixth day of manhood brings the consciousness of true standard and true health, health in business, health in government, health in religion, health in morals, health in the home and bodily health, for health fundamentally means soundness. Man is the climax of creation, and even in human experience man is the only creature who can embrace the universe in his thought. So this symbol of manhood brings to inspired thought the true sense of a compound idea, including all creation. It thus reveals true manhood as the eternal consciousness of right ideas, and as the ideal, the infinite Son of God. The seventh day now symbolizes not only completeness, rest, and fulfillment, but also the glory, the beauty, and the perfection of the divine plan, revealing the nature of the infinite motherhood of God, which John symbolized when he defined God as love. The practical application of the days of creation. At this point the reader may say, I can follow this reasoning, but what has it all to do with me? How can I use it? How is it practical? We've already stressed the value and indeed the all-importance of man's ability to think, and to think in an ordered, exact, and inspired manner. This is what makes him man. Then can man not learn the nature of reality, of fundamental spiritual ideas, in a definite way? And since thinking is basic, should not these ideas manifest themselves with divine power under all circumstances, when understood intelligently? In every practical subject, we expect to learn the substance of that subject in an ordered way, and then to use it dynamically. Surely the science of life should be no exception. To take only one practical illustration of this natural sequence of the 7 days, suppose in a community one were faced with a chaotic state of affairs. Would one not immediately begin to introduce law the first day? Out of law would at once follow order the second day. Immediately the rule of right would be made definite the third day. Then a system of government would develop the fourth day. The method of putting this system into operation individually would give life and being to it the fifth day. There would naturally result a form of government the sixth day. And this would bring a foretaste of the plan and design of real government the seventh day. Thus one would be employing the 7 days of creation through ideas of law, order, rule, system, method, form, and design. It might be argued that one would use such a process in any case, whether one were conscious of the root notions of reality or not. This may be so, for even as man may have a distinct flair for music and be able to play certain tunes by ear without understanding the science of music on which they are based, so may a great man with a flair for dealing with his fellow beings be successful in government. But how much more certain, permanent, and universal must such a process be when the science which lies behind all government is understood and practiced, and moreover, when these fundamental root notions are seen to be applicable to every phase of life in multiform ways and myriad combinations. That there is an ordered way to the understanding of reality must be self-evident, for order is an essential aspect of reality. Men have constantly felt after and sought the divine order. They have uttered such statements as, "Order is heaven's first law." In beauty, grandeur, order, his handiwork is shown, and so on. Hence, in a period of great spiritual enlightenment, the inspired Hebrew writers glimpsed and stated the natural and ordered revelation of God's nature. This they did with utter simplicity, using familiar symbols, but with the greatest profundity. The order of these days of creation, when discerned in their true spiritual meaning, is seen to be inevitable, and to present a perfect sequence of thought, with each day leading irresistibly to the next. The developing sense of the days of creation reveals higher essences. As the student's understanding of these days of creation grows, he finds that, although at first they may seem to be just 7 successive stages of developing thought, this finite sense is gradually left behind. As the vast range of spiritual ideas conveyed by these days unfolds to thought, the 7 days of creation inevitably expand into infinite numerals of ordered spiritual consciousness. The term numeral is used in such a way throughout this book to denote a diversified and individualized concept of the infinite. To use a mathematical analogy again, we begin the study of mathematics by learning the order of the 10 digits, and then we learn how to use them in endless combinations through addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Later, as thought rises in the scale of mathematics, the basic digits have become so natural and familiar that in their use we are no longer conscious only of their order, as we were in the early stages. The digits are now symbols of definite values to be used in manifold ways. Mathematics is later symbolized to us in terms of algebra, trigonometry, and so on. In fact, higher and more refined terms are taking the place of our initial symbols. We now think more and more in the broad terms of mathematics in its higher essences, although we're still using spontaneously the values of the original numbers we learned, and we are still dependent on the 4 processes of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. But our understanding of mathematics is now becoming subjective as well as objective. In a similar way, the author began many years ago to perceive that the 7 days of creation as recorded in Genesis 1 through Genesis 2:3 presented the ordered revelation of spiritual thought, each day having its specific value and tone. As he continued to study them, he soon found that the tones of the individual days were enriched in his thinking until they became to him numerals of infinite spiritual consciousness. He also realized that these numerals of thought combined endlessly with each other throughout the Bible, and at length he discovered that they operated in a definite calculus of inspired thought, and illustrated an infinite system of divine metaphysics. All this time, the ideas conveyed by the days of creation, as they expanded into numerals of infinite spiritual thought and consciousness, were guiding his thinking to a deeper and more exalted understanding of the true nature and essence of the divine principle of all things, that is, God himself, the Infinite One. So the 7 days of creation, which constitute the primary revelation of God's true nature in an ordered way, swell into infinite numerals of conscious spiritual thought and idea, until they are no longer merely 7 successive stages of developing thought, but symbolize an infinitude of divine thought and idea. At this point, these numerals are not just 7 in a limited sense, but the number 7 may be applied to them as a symbol of divine perfection and completeness. 7 is frequently used in this way throughout the Scriptures. Epitomes of the days of creation and the numerals of spiritual consciousness. If the author had to epitomize in one word the specific tone, nature, and value of each of these days and numerals, he would designate them as follows. First day, thought. Second day, purity. Third day, definiteness. Fourth day, spiritual power. Fifth day, multiplication. Sixth day, manhood. Seventh day, rest. First numeral, intelligence. Second numeral, substance. Third numeral, identity. Fourth numeral, one. Fifth numeral, eternity. Sixth numeral, consciousness. Seventh numeral, perfection. In using these terms to describe the numerals of infinite consciousness, it is necessary to explain the specific sense in which they are employed in this book, as each one of them has such a broad range of meaning in general use. The words taken to epitomize the numerals are used as follows. Eternity. Intelligence signifies the primal nature of God as the one divine mind. Substance signifies the infinite reality of God's nature as spirit. Identity signifies the immutability of the infinite selfhood of God as soul. 1. Signifies God as the all, the whole, and the infinite. Signifies the essential being of God without beginning or end, the one life. Consciousness signifies the exact spiritual awareness and infinite cognition of the divine idea as truth. Perfection signifies the completeness and fulfillment of God's presence and power as divine love. Thus we begin with the few simple but definite essentials of the infinite system for symbolizing the ideas of God, the only means by which we can interpret God aright. In this way we are beginning as the Scriptures begin, and as we would begin in any subject, that is, with definite root notions. And as these root notions of inspired thought expand, they become numerals of infinite consciousness. At the back of this book there are 2 appendices to which the reader may care to refer from time to time. These appendices illustrate in more detail certain fundamental aspects of this subject. They have been placed in this position to allow of simplicity and directness in the composition of the book, and also to enable easy reference to be made to them. Appendix 1 contains a brief table showing a few of the ideas conveyed by each day of creation, and giving an indication of how these days expand to symbolize higher essences of thought, and so become definite numerals of consciousness. The divine calculus uses us. As the reader will remember, Sir James Jeans records that Leibniz's hope was to be able to reduce all the fundamental ideas of reasoning to a very small number of primitive elements, or root notions, upon which all men could agree. Has not the Bible done this very thing for us in the record of the 7 days of creation, or 7 stages of ordered and inspired thought? Leibniz saw that once this could be done, then it would be possible to construct a calculus for the operation of these symbols or root notions. Consequently, our next logical step will be to show how the Bible indicates just such a calculus. Let us remember, above all, that as we understand the fundamentals of the system of mathematics, music, or any human subject, we have to use them, whereas when we understand spiritual ideas, they use us, for they are essentially dynamic. Hence Jesus' divine and scientific statement, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." We do not have to make divine ideas operate, for they are infinitely operative. We have only to understand them spiritually and scientifically, and to love them, and they will use us. That is the vast difference between human systems, which are of today, and the eternal system of infinite reality and power.